All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles Podcast. Super excited for today's show, guys. We are welcoming Natalie Onions, Vice President of Customer Experience at Customer IO, based in Columbus, Ohio. Nat, say hello to the CX Nation.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here.
So, guys, I'm pumped to have Nat on the show today, sharing her customer-focused business leader journey. She works at a super cool business, and she's gonna dive into it. But Customer IO is doing some pretty incredible things within not just the customer experience space, but helping their clients think about how they can get really, really good at managing the way that they're managing their customer communications and learning and listening from the customer. So now I'm gonna let you jump right into it. But why don't you start off today's show like we start off all these episodes? Set the stage first for our listeners. How did you get into the space? How did you find your way into customer experience, customer success? What were some of the stepping stones in your career that got you to the position that you're in today at Customer IO?
Oh yeah, it's been a long journey. So I think my career I'm probably 15 years into my career, or my serious career, if you want to call it that. But I've got a performing arts background. That was kind of my big dream. And as anyone else who's had that same dream probably knows, it's tough one to break into. So I originally, like fresh out of college, had an opportunity to join a very small production company. And so I did that and started it right at the bottom, and I put in my hours. I listened, absorbed as much as I could, and eventually sort of got promoted up to a more customer facing role. And eventually became the client services director there. So started off with some project manager sort of projects to be working on and keeping customers on deadline and on track and on budget. I found that I was good at it, and I found that I enjoyed it a lot as well. So I spent some really good years at my company back in England. But they also had a SaaS product that was a second branch of the business. And it was something that I'd always been interested in, but never had that much exposure to. So when I had the chance to do some more of that and really dig into the side of it, that was when I started to really enjoy what SaaS was and the motion that it was taking. This was sort of 6 years ago. So it was just an exciting time. There were a lot of big players just making their name for themselves at that point, and lots of new initiatives popping up all over the place. So when I moved from England sort of 6 years ago, I was looking for work and I decided to commit to SaaS. It was a pretty easy decision, and I started my job at Customer IO as a CSM and have just committed and clearly done some good work and made my way through the ranks to being VP of customer experience. And now I'm responsible for all of the post-sales experience for our customers.
That's awesome. So Nat, number one, thank you for sharing that. My immediate thought is just, it's funny. So number one, I think we've had a handful of musicians that have been on the show that have kind of started their whole customer focused business leader with either music or an art or bands or so you are in a very small club of people here on the CXC podcast that's really where they got their start. What I love about that, and our listeners know, like I grew up playing in bands and stuff like that. I still play some music to this day, but it's funny, music and customer experience is interesting because I think for some of us that had to grow up like playing music, learning music, playing with bands, especially because of the collaboration. Like you're not going to be good at band if you can't figure out how to listen and collaborate and then kind of like rebuild on it. But I love hearing that starting, because I already know kind of when I hear of CX and CSer that has that type of background, they had some really good foundational work before they ever even got into the professional side of what the stuff is that we do as CX and CSers today. So thank you for sharing that. Second part, really quick. Honestly, it's amazing. We do have some of our guests who have I think the luxury or the privilege of being able to do the workup that you just expressed, meaning like oftentimes a lot of the people that we have in the show, they were hired in when a business gets to a certain level or a certain level of growth, or they were hired in from outside because they'd been doing CX or customer success or customer support or client services in another business. What's funny with the experience that I have is some of the best CX and CS leaders are folks that are able to go up the ladder in a business because number one, they probably are some of the biggest masters of the customer journey in that company. They've seen where you came from. They know where you're going. They've done all the bridge building and the foundational work to get from point A to point B, whatever that means, whether it's getting to the Series A or getting to the Series B or going public, right? Like there's all these different ways. But I love that you got the chance to kind of really work in several different positions and work your way up to leading the CX team. I think it makes such a massive difference for folks that are in our space. So I'm just calling that out as some pretty cool things to start. I'd love to dive into the first pillar of the team. Why don't you spend a couple minutes talking about the team that you guys are building over at Customer IO, and definitely spend a couple minutes talking about your team and how you've been able to kind of lay some of the awesome folks that you're working with out on the pitch as you guys have scaled the business and as you've grown Customer IO.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, I joined the team or joined the company as a CSM, and we had a separate technical support team at that time. We didn't have any contract team in place, even though we had people, we had customers on a contract, and the billing was done by a single person on our finance revenue side of things. But as the sales team got more successful, as the marketing team dug in and the business started to grow, we really found that we were finding some distinct separation between the phases of what our customers were going through and what they needed at that time. And so we made the decision to sort of bring in different elements and different skill sets to handle that. Because, if you're hiring a CSM, you're looking for somebody that's got that creative sense to them and that is outgoing and, like you said, collaborative. But it's kind of a different skill set than someone who is, perhaps got some more of those sales skills, that's able to talk to a customer about why they should renew with us and negotiate and handle objections. And so we very quickly saw that we needed to build a team that catered for each piece of that customer journey and each persona, I guess, of the customer that we're working with. Because working with the marketer on their messages, which is primarily where the customer success team works, is very different from working with procurement, which is where our contract team works now. Or with a CRO that we now have our billing team handle. So that's really where the customer, the structure came from, I guess, was just realizing that there isn't a catch-all persona of employee to handle all of that. And the more you scale, the messier it gets if you don't have the right teams with the right boundaries in there, so that when to distinctly hand things off. So we came up with the structure for 4 different teams on the post-sales side of things. So we've got our technical support team, who are the ones that are handling things along the lines of, this doesn't work, this seems to be a bug, I can't figure out how to connect these 2 dots in the platform. We've then got the customer success team working on more of the strategy-based side of things and having that deep ongoing relationship with the customer. I actually like to call the customer success managers an extension of our customer's business. That's how integral they are to that customer. Then we've got our contracts team, who is working on renewing people. They're also working with some of our customers that maybe started off in a smaller place and then are looking to expand into a larger contracted plan that we have. And then we've got our billing team to handle all of those customer facing billing questions, disputes, and the technical pieces behind the scene. So having 4 teams is a lot. It's a lot of people to keep up with as individuals. And having been here from the beginning, I've gone from managing a team of 3 people in my first year, and now there are over 50 people on the customer experience team. So it's been a little bit jarring at times to go from, I know everyone's spouse's name and I know who's got kids, and I know at the drop of a hat exactly where someone lives. And realizing now that I need to just be realistic and know everybody's name, know their face, but not beat myself up about not knowing everything. That's been a change, but I think this year has really been key for me in terms of building the structure and really stacking the deck for a successful 2023. We did a ton of hiring, a ton of promoting as well. So I've now got very, very strong functional leaders that are around the director level, in each of my departments. And so I have very trusted relationships that I can focus on the business strategy and the holistic nature of the customer journey, and then trust each functional leader to be executing on those strategies on my behalf, so that I'm not always tied down to being in the weeds. I do have that benefit now of a bird's eye view, and fantastic leaders executing the strategies with really talented teams of individual contributors.
Nat, that is awesome. So I think number one, you probably just made a lot of our listeners at some growth focused startup companies very jealous, because they are living in the earlier world that you talked about. CX and CS becomes a catch-all for many. If you don't know where to put it, give it to CX or give it to CS. That's a very common thing. So for our listeners, that's not just you. That's not just your leadership team. That's all of us. That's a big part of why we've got one of the most interesting places in most businesses. We get to see a little bit of all of it. So I love that you kind of laid that land for us. First thought is that immediately comes to mind that I want to unpack is you mentioned role clarity. You mentioned lines in the sand. You mentioned understanding what people need to be doing. And Nat, you're gonna laugh when I say this, but like, it's almost like most leadership teams forget to just remind either themselves or their extended leadership team on a regular basis, how are we doing with our role definitions and our role clarity? Meaning, like, where does one role end and where does the next pick up? Humans don't want to show up at work and do a shitty job. They want to show up and they want to do an incredible job. They want to know what they're accountable for, what they're responsible for, what they have the authority to either do or not do, or know kind of when they need to sort of ring the bell and go up the ladder for either support or coaching or advice. And so I love that you called out early that became one of the big focus points that you have. I think the other thing too is, like, the deeper I get into just talking with other awesome customer focused business leaders like yourself, I constantly keep in my brain when I hear people talking about their team, I'm like, I have like this customer journey that I'm building in my head as I'm listening around what it looks like. And it's just so common for even incredible companies that are killing it, they're doing tens of millions of dollars in annual revenue, if not $100 million a year in revenue, to not kind of tie off the ends. So like, understand where marketing's role ends, understand where sales role ends, understand if maybe onboarding is a completely separate function, that even before customer success or account management, maybe onboarding needs to be its own specific world because it's complex and there's a lot of different things. And maybe you got to actually become a SME in or a subject matter expert in what things need to happen in the first 30 days or the first 60 days or the first 90 days for someone to like understand what the value is that they're getting from what they're buying from your business, understand how to use the damn thing. And if you're talking about SaaS, this is like, we could have a whole other show just on product adoption, product knowledge. Product adoption and knowledge leads to product mastery. If you can get to product mastery, your ability to upsell and cross-sell, probably a whole hell of a lot easier. And you don't ever hear CROs talking about that. They just think it's like, well, you got, 1,000 customers, just go upsell all of them. Okay, well, only 20% of them like us. And they're the 20% that bring 80% of our revenue. So like, I love how you kind of talked about the organization, the alignment. You mentioned the collaboration piece too, because some of the best customer experience and customer success teams in the world, I would argue that they get this team pillar right first, and they figure out kind of how to think about what the players need to look like on the pitch. And then they start getting into the weeds on the other pillars. And they start to think about what tech stack will set them up for the most success. What playbook do we need to write to really do an excellent job of scaling this thing? And then the feedback part. How do you get really good at sort of leveraging what our customers and our users are telling us? And how do you get good at leveraging what the best and the brightest inside of our business that are building these products and services? What do they need to tell us? So like, I love some of the stuff that you really kind of just laid out there for us. I'd love to pick your brain on last thing before we jump into tools. I don't know that I've heard one of our guests lay out that good of a post-sales organization set of teams again. Do you mind calling them out one more time for our listeners, just around how you've divided that?
Yeah, sure. So technical support is handling those specific technical questions, fielding bug reports, things like that, helping people just navigate the implementation, that those, how do I get my data in here? I'm seeing an error. I don't know what the code is that I should be using for this email. Those technical nitty-gritty things. Then customer success is working on the sort of long-term strategy behind our tool. So not just how can I get this one small task done, but what does that task actually mean for my messaging strategy? Why is it important for me to be building this type of messaging campaign? What are my 5 steps ahead? What are my business goals, and how can I use customer AI to achieve them? That's where the customer success team comes in. And that's why I refer to them. They're an extension of the customer's business, because they should know what the business goals are. They should know what their primary contacts development goals are. Like, how can we make you look good to your boss?
Yep.
Contracts team, they work on the renewal of all of our premium or enterprise contracts, as well as helping people move up from our smaller plans into one of the bigger plans. And then the billing team, who are doing a lot of the customer facing billing support, as well as working on the systems and processes that allow us to have flexibility in our billing, so that we're not in a position where we say, well, you can't pay annually because the system says no, or
Yep.
we can't give you an invoice because it doesn't generate it like that. So yeah, that's how it's all laid out.
I love it. And I only wanted you to run through that one more time for our listeners, because I know for a fact that there's so many folks out there where they're almost left early on not to be able to, like, just go ahead and slam all that into what our CSMs do. And it's like, okay, fine. And I get it. And every business is different. And sometimes, let's call it what it is. You mentioned like some of the early years at your time at Customer IO, you got to be nitty and gritty, and you got to work with what you got. And frankly, typically you need a small group of people that just can manage and carry a bunch of weight on the sled. That's a normal thing to kind of get these businesses off the ground. But I love what you kind of just called out with those different strategic, like surgical functions. As a business scales, as a business matures, certainly as a book of business or a customer portfolio matures and scales, you start to very quickly realize how you want to talk about running around with your hair on fire. Like, if you had to manage all of those different functions, that's hard. Number one, you're shrinking capacity. So maybe a CSM doesn't have the ability to work with more than 10 customers, because if you're doing billing and contracting and success and like that's an implementation, like that's a ton of stuff. The other thing too is just like anything in life, some people are better than others at those different cuts or at those different things that you're doing. So I love those ideas on the team side now, like tons of great ideas and CTAs around how people can kind of be thinking about organizing and stratifying their teams as they think about growing. I'd love to jump into the second CX pillar of tools. Nat, give us a sense for what you and your team are kind of using over at Customer IO, or share with us what you can about what type of SaaS solutions have really kind of allowed you guys to scale into the future and to manage all the growth that you've been enjoying over the last several years.
Yeah. So when the CS team was first founded, I guess it was brought in as a bit of an experiment. The exec team had decided that they wanted to have a premium offering. They wanted to change the way that our pricing and our packaging worked. And so the differentiator that they came up with was having customer success for our premium customers and nothing of that nature for basic customers. So they brought the team in. I started in April, and knowing that this pricing was going to be rolled out in sort of July. Then we had a few months to get the program built, but we didn't know how it was going to, like, is the sales team going to be successful at selling this new product? And if it's not, and if it actually turns out to be, that we're not seeing that ROI it's quickly enough, maybe the program's going to get cut. They might pivot in a different direction. So it was brought in as a bit of an experiment. I'm very comfortable with risk. And so I actually had a great time trying things, experimenting. I had a great time failing, because there was a ton of that in the first place. But
and that's where you go, that learning, Nat, too. You learn every time you fail on that stuff. You're learning something new for the next 10 at-bats.
exactly. And yeah, still making mistakes to this day. And as long as you own it, I'm on board. But slight digression there. So yeah, because it was a bit experimental and there were core things that we needed to do to just, build this program, get some playbooks in place, figure out what the offering was. We essentially were just piecemealing other existing softwares that the rest of the company was using and trying to bend them to what we needed. So we were just using the sales CRM to keep our customer records. And we were using just, we're a Google Suite company, so we were just using shared drive folders to store assets for sharing around, things like that. So we used what we had. We didn't make any big investments in tooling. It wasn't until maybe 2 years in, and the CS team was showing a lot of progress and a lot of success. I was actually in a management position at this point, and as you do when you start networking with peers and speaking to people in more advanced stages of their career than you, tooling really started to come up as a big discussion point. And so I sort of made this pitch that we need a dedicated CS tool. We're responsible for a huge amount of revenue for the business as a team. Every other big functioning team has a dedicated tool that's just for them, whether it's something like GitHub for our engineers or Figma for our designers. CS was, it felt a bit like an underserved team in the business at the time. So it was an easy pitch to make. And we then started exploring tools and landed on Vitally.
Awesome.
So
nice.
yeah, I don't know if that's one that's come up often or not, but we adopted them when they were in a very early stage. I think there was just 2 of them in the business. And so from being an early adopter, we were actually in a fortunate position to collaborate with them on what we needed and how to build our use case. So that's the primary CS tool. It's now our source of truth for all of our data. We do have a ton of data collected from other places in the business, all plugging into it. We've got our Stripe data coming in from billing, so we can look at revenue. We've got product data coming in from both from our CRM and also from Mixpanel. We're using our own products as well to send data so we can see what customers are up to. So, and then email records and everything else in there. So that's been a really great tool. And I think, the key for me when we have got so many different stages of the customer journey is accessibility for the whole company. I wanted to build a stack for my team that at any moment, if anybody else in the business asks, what's going on with a particular customer, or, I can help you, but I need to see what the issue is, we can share a link with them and everyone can see it. Nothing is happening in a silo. It's all there, it's all shareable, so that when we do need to escalate something outside of the scope of what the CX team is doing, it is easy to do so. It's not something that is going to be prohibitive, or it's not going to plug easily into the rest of our stack. So that's always really, really important to me, is will everybody else be able to see this when we need to get them involved, or when we want to show off about it. Celebrating success is it's a key part. So that
I
was
love that. Nat, I love that. And I also, what you make me think is, like, most companies and most leaders in general, not just customer focused business leaders, but most business leaders buy into the fact that, like, customer experience, customer success, it is a team sport. It requires some involvement from every single person in your team and in your business. And I would argue, with the exception of maybe a handful of very specific, niche areas of focus and of subject matter expertise, if some of your roles or some of your teams and departments aren't contributing to your customer success and to your customer journey, you might want to unpack what is really going on and what maybe some of their major focus areas or OKRs are that they're contributing towards. But that idea of building in public on the CX and the CS side, I think, is so imperative. I also just think that what I've learned with my own CX background and journey and working with most of our customers is, like, the faster you can either socialize the wins and the losses, but then also get like direct feedback internally from some of your other coworkers and your other friendly employees, like that's where you start to get buy-in on some of this stuff. That's where if you can get people's opinions and their thoughts and their feelings and their preferences early, or as you're building, even if it's just socializing as you're going and you're showing the live pulse on what's happening or what you learned or what this month's showing or what that's where you can really start to get some energy and some charisma kind of built behind CX. And the minute you get that, that's where things are really, really dangerous, because if you have a business that's bought in plus invested plus involved on the customer experience optimization side, you're in a pretty awesome spot. Because the reality is this, there's a lot of companies out there that, like, part of why CX and CS leadership positions are hard is you spend all damn day fighting internally, which is not what it should be. Like, those are your coworkers. Those are people that you're like, you've decided to be on the same ship together to weather any type of storm. Like, do it well and do it like proudly, right? But I love that you're putting this stuff out in a place and you've built your tech stack where it was going to be easy and almost a programmatic way of being able to socialize and share the learnings and the findings that are happening in the CX function. I think that's awesome, and our listeners should take that as a CTA to think about how you can build that same type of socialization into your own day-to-day.
Cool.
Nat, let's dive into the third CX pillar of process. We get a lot of different ideas. We get a lot of different ways that CX and CS leaders are thinking about the way that they manage their knowledge base, how they think about curating their FAQs, how they think about optimizing or refining or editing or updating their FAQs and their playbooks. I'd love for you to spend a couple minutes about how you and the team have kind of thought about managing your playbooks for your actual team, and then I'd love to kind of hear how you guys have sort of built out your customer facing FAQs and knowledge base as you've scaled customer IO.
Yeah, so we've actually started to, I think in the last year, we've really dove in hard to the idea of data-driven playbooks. So, I think it's really important to set things up so that what the customer is doing, what their data is telling you, is what drives the next action. So, for example, if a customer starts to shrink their database with us, that's a bad sign. And so once that starts to happen, once that data starts to hit us, it sends a signal straight to Vitally that kicks a playbook into action. It sends a ping to the CSM. It programmatically pulls together a bunch of invoice information. And it can even go as far as sending an email out to the customer asking them to jump on a call with the CSM. So wherever we can just let the data drive things for us, we really do that. It takes a lot of QA, because obviously you don't want playbooks to be kicked into action until you're really confident that it's getting people at the right time every time. But that's been key for us because it is such a time saver and it removes some of that human error. I have a fantastic team across all of my departments, but anytime we can remove that potential for something to just get slipped or overlooked, we do it. That's why we work in tech, so that we can use it to make our jobs easier and to make our work better. So we also made a change this year because of the way that the team has expanded and the growing expectations that our customers have on us. We now have an enablement role on the team. So that person is just purely responsible. They're totally focused on things like playbook maintenance. They're responsible for actually assessing what our competitors are doing, what material they're putting out there, and then saying, we got to make our own version of it. We need to be circulating this thought leadership. So enablement roles, they're such a hot commodity at the moment. Just try hiring an experienced enablement person and you'll see how difficult it is.
That's a tough search to run right there, Nat.
Very hard. We were lucky enough that we had an extremely skilled person on the team that made a wonderful pitch for herself to take this on. So immensely grateful that that's the kind of talent that I'm working with to proactively see these opportunities. But yeah, I mean, I think outside of that, just building it in as a good habit, in the same way that you brush your teeth every day. Just divide up the work and give people a playbook to check every day. Is there a redundant link in there? Is there an old image in there? Have we found a better way to do this? And just kind of building that muscle of, this is something that I own as an individual contributor. It's part of my job. And then as you get to the point where maybe you're able to look at that enablement role, you've kind of already got things in a good place. They're not having to unpick a bunch of mess, but yeah, it's definitely also doable on more of an individual accountability basis.
I love that. I think that there is probably two roles that when people ask me, like, Adrian, what some of the stuff that you guys are doing with your clients at CXC, or some of the folks that you're talking with on the podcast, what would be like the one or two like secret sauce pieces? Like, what are the two things? What's like the one thing that you could just throw at the team that's going to make it better overnight, regardless of if they're a company that's doing $5 million in revenue, or if it's a company that's doing $50+ million a year in revenue? And I think I've got Nat, I usually have a laundry list of things, so it's really hard for me to come up with the one or the two. But I will say this: what is becoming more and more clear to me. You mentioned this earlier when we were on tools, but of all the 4 CX pillars, tools does become a really sticky, tricky place and part of the growth cycle. Meaning, once a business even gets to the point where they can start to afford the right types of leaders to come in who have maybe done this stuff before in other places, or at least they can start picking up and building and constructing what each team's books can be. It's very common for your tech stack to get a little bit out of control very quickly. So maybe there's too many tools. Most tools, even the best tools, are wildly underutilized as it is. So even if you think you're killing it with your CRM or your ticketing solution, or your project management solution, or your communication optimization solutions, you're probably underutilizing that tool. And that's the reality, guys. Like, I want to say there's some of these reports out there that even some of the best SaaS technology companies in the world, they can see 30% utilization rates of all the different feature sets that their product team and their CS team and their design team spends like tens of thousands of hours thinking about the stuff that they know is going to be the next greatest hit. And sometimes it is, but a lot of times your customers just kind of need the one or the two or the three major applications that are going to give them the value that they need to keep using it, to keep renewing, and to keep maybe even thinking about entertaining your upsell, your cross-sell ideas. Long-winded way of saying this: if you don't have an individual, an awesome guy or gal on your team that is thinking about enablement and thinking about CX, CS, ops, like, right, like your point of brushing the teeth, best damn way to call that out now, which is like the rest of the team, even if you're lucky like that and you've got these clearly defined, organized roles, the rest of the team is busy doing stuff every single day to manage that stuff, whether it's work with your customers, work with your product, thinking about some of the different granular steps that go into keeping people happy, using feedback, understanding feedback. Point is like, if you don't have one or two people on the team that is actually able to look at the tools, look at the process set, do internal education. So I'm pumped that you called out your one teammate where you guys were lucky enough to find someone in-house, because this is the other thing. This is hard stuff to hire out for, guys. Meaning that if you think that an expert an enablement expert or a CS ops expert can come in and change the stuff overnight, you're crazy. They still need to do minimum. I would say the best enablement and CS ops pros in the world, they need a 90-day listening and learning tour minimum to be able to even think about coming up with prescriptive CTAs that are going to help drive innovation and progress and optimization within your team. So like, but this idea of like CS ops, revenue operations, if you're on a heavier mathematical portfolio side, and enablement, this is something that we need all of our listeners to be thinking about. And if you haven't already finished your 2023 goals and your OKRs and your team direction and planning, add this somewhere and have a conversation with somebody on your LT around, hey, what are we going to do to make sure that I have the right type of enablement and operative support to make sure that the system is working and the processes are working and my team is educated, coached, and supported. And by the way, that's not always on the VP or on the primary CX and CS leader too, because sometimes they're busy doing these other big heavy initiatives within the portfolio. So I love that you call that out. Nat, let's jump into the fourth and the final CX pillar of feedback. I'd love to kind of hear how you've been thinking about customer feedback, and I'd love to think about how you and your team have been thinking about employee feedback as you scaled the business and the team.
Yeah, sure. So all of my departments, we're in a very privileged position as far as, intelligence goes, because we are on the front lines. We're the ones that are hearing that firsthand customer feedback, be it praise, frustration, elation. I've had frustrated customers literally crying on calls with me because their CMO is breathing down their neck and they're struggling to deliver something. So, I think it's it's really great, and it almost goes without saying that the CX department has to be ready to listen to that feedback, and have a good way of making it actionable. But it gets its value and it gets its traction when you create really strong feedback loops to the rest of the business. Because essentially, the product and engineering teams, I value the relationships that I have, my team has, and that I have with the leaders on products and engineering so much, because they are completely open and so grateful for what I can, when I put my team in the same room as them and say, right, we're going to advocate for what we know our customers want. And it took a long time for us to get a process together that made that valuable to the product team, and that made it a realistic conversation. Because if you just put a CSM or a TSE in front of a project manager and say, hey, tell them what customers want, it's going to be an incoherent ream of, well, they said this and then they said that. So we've built this really great process whereby the product team shares their, I think, 7 or 8 top priorities that they know that they should be working on. And then the CSMs behind the scenes, and the TSEs behind the scenes, all kind of take the customer feedback for a month and vote on what the top 3 items are that we should be advocating for with the product team. And then they go into a room and they say, I'm pitching to you that your current 4th priority be swapped with this one, and here's why. And so once we got into that habit and we defined, we said to the product team, what's useful? How do we present this? What can you use from us? Once we got there, it works like a dream, and it's so valuable to me. And I know that it's valuable to the product team as well. So sharing that feedback, well, firstly, hearing that feedback, incredibly important, of course, but what you do with it afterwards, that's really where the magic happens. And it is so worth your time and the investment in the relationship with the people in the company to make that good, to make it solid, so that you have got those people to lean on. And that could change the future of your business, of your product.
Yep.
And that's what the product team is trying to do. They're trying to build something they know our customers want and that they know the market is looking for. So I can't emphasize enough, just make them your best friends. Products and engineering, it should be such a great relationship. Sales as well, obviously, they need to know what customers are doing once they've been through the sales cycle. But yeah, I think my favorite relationship is the one with our product managers. And then as far as the internal feedback goes, I think there's a lot to say about investing in managers and investing in a good people team, so that everyone is given the tools and the coaching that they need to deliver feedback, even in those awkward moments. And that they have the means to coach people through those moments where feedback is necessary. I think we've been around for over 10 years now, so we have got some great systems and people in place where we know where it's appropriate to give feedback and where it's not. That's not to say that things don't slip sometimes, and maybe a comment that's best served in a DM comes across in a public thread. But the key thing that I always come back to is everyone is trying to do their best work. That's what they're trying to do. And there's a lot to be said for intent versus impact. So, maybe the impact of what someone is saying you rubs you the wrong way. Maybe it comes across as a little bit snippy, a little bit sarcastic or something, but the intent is to help you get better. The intent is not to ruin your day. It's not to piss you off. It is to help everybody on this unified mission that we have to do great work for our business and great work for our customers. So always just tying back to okay, here's the impact that I'm feeling, but let me try and find the intent, and then I'll get my feelings together from there. I think that's something that I always coach my managers and my reports to think about. And some of the most valuable advice that I've been given. I did not come up with that by myself. It was given to me by a leadership coach, and definitely changed my approach to how I absorb feedback.
I love it. Nat, there's the big call out about connecting or building cohesion and just almost like constant collaboration between CXCS and product. Totally agree. Could not agree more. And then I know our listeners have been listening to me pound on this drum now for a while, but like, I think the easiest thing you can do if you want to kind of take the next step within your own customer focused business leader journey is do exactly what Nat just said about how do you build relationships with your friends and product. Definitely agree with you, sales too. Sales is a huge one part too, because you need to think about how you're going to receive customers, right? But product is how you support, how you keep them engaged, how then a lot of the listening, let's call it is, especially at a SaaS company like Nat's guys, like you're listening to product features, you're listening to bugs, you're listening to things that like your users are literally telling you what would make the thing even better, even stickier. Oh, I'll go get the next 10 licenses if this thing or that thing is added or taken away, whatever it might be. But like the other thing too is I just think organizationally, if you want to think about how to max out your team and your department and your personal roles value, get those friends in product, get those friends in sales and marketing, and start to basically be able to help with traffic controlling around which actions need to take precedent, even over whatever our CEOs and our COOs and our CFOs and our CROs are asking for, because it's common for them to be the loudest voices, guys. But if you can tie the customer data and the usability data directly behind why things are sitting in a top 3 function, usually those C-suites don't argue with you, even though they like to have the last word, and that's fine. But like, they don't argue with data. They like the numbers. That makes them feel good. It makes them feel safe. It makes them feel good about the investments and the decisions that they're going to make. And lastly, it's just, again, it's a team sport part now. I think on some of the best teams or some of the best client engagement work that we've done here at CXC, it's definitely building bridges, laying plumbing, laying electrical across. Even if you do have silos, like start, I know ripping them down can be hard, but like start building bridges, start laying plumbing and communicative like cables so that people understand what's going on. And then there's the last part, tribal knowledge, man. Like if you could be in a position where your CS team can listen and learn from some of your product leaders or from some of your revenue leaders, you're sharing tribal knowledge across the business. You're loading other team members' lips for maybe maybe they start using terms or they're going to start saying things that they wouldn't have known if they didn't get to sit in some internal session where you're debating and talking about what needs to be top 3. So like, don't forget that either, guys. It's an easy way for on the EX side of the game to keep your A players feeling super engaged, feeling collaborative, feeling like they're learning a little bit about what other teams and departments are doing. So I love it. Natalie, this has been fantastic. I love all the incredible insights and all the awesome ideas that you brought. Before we wrap up and before I let you go, I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity. Where can people, number one, get in touch with you or your team? And then where can people learn more about the awesome work that you guys are doing over at Customer IO?
Yeah, sure. So we've got a ton of information, including pricing, all of our docs, really rich library of documentation just on our main marketing website, which is customer.io. And then we recently launched a customer community as well, which is open to anybody. You don't have to be a customer of ours. If you are passionate about email or marketing messaging, hop on in there and maybe meet some cool people. And that website is community.customer.io. So those are the 2 main places that you can find us. Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn as well if you wanted to talk directly. I'm always happy to dive into talking about experiences and expanding networks and stuff. So and if any women from Chief out there listening, then recent inductee into the Chief network as well. So
nice.
Looking forward to meeting a few more of you, hopefully in the future.
That's awesome, Nat. And I'll make sure that we can put that in the show notes so some of our Chief members can definitely find you, because I know we have more and more Chief CX and CS pros out there that are going to be making huge things happen in the near future for sure. Well, Nat, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining the CX Chronicles podcast. I'm going to look forward to chatting with you again really soon.
Yeah, sounds great. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and see you soon.